I have long thought of Molly Ivins, Ann Richards, and Louise Raggio as a triumvirate of Texas goddesses. We can't claim Molly, but Ann and Louise were not just UUs. They were members of First Church Dallas. We're going to start with Louise, aka the Texas Tornado. She and her husband started attending the Unitarian Church in Dallas back when it was a small building on Maple Avenue. They were present for the groundbreaking for the new church on Preston Road in 1949. The garden there is named in her honor. Now you need to know a little bit about legal history to understand her contribution to our lives. I have dealt with family law cases in lots of states, and none of those family codes can compare with our own. While it isn't perfect, we keep working on it. We strive to protect those who need it, including young children bewildered by their parents' divorce, and to adapt it to societal changes. It gives everybody a framework for how we work, for how, absent agreement, marital property is valued and divided, how custody and parenting time work, and how much child support is paid. Prior to our family code, these matters were left up to judicial discretion. And so outcomes with the exact same facts could be wildly different in courts in the same building. You may have heard or remember that married women in Texas could not manage their own property until 1975. Any money, real estate, and personal property a woman had at the time of marriage immediately came under her husband's control, as did her wages and any inheritances she received. If her husband was a gambler or a wastrel, well, she should have chosen better. To give you some context, while Texas was grappling with this issue in the 1970s, married women were given the right to manage their own property in New York in 1845. The times were changing in the 1950s and 60s, even in Texas. But change needs a firm hand at the wheel and a superb navigator to make it benefit the most of us. For Texas women, that captain was Louise Raggio.
In the past, when a woman married, she was supposed to quit her job, go home and have lots of children, and not be a professional. And the men, whether they wanted to or not, were going to have to keep working and support the family. Now there is a choice.
Born in 1919, before women had won the right to vote, Louise Ballerstedt, a farm girl from Manor, Texas, displayed her strong character and determination at an early age. Graduating valedictorian from Austin High School in 1936, she became the first in her family to go on to college. After college, she accepted a Rockefeller grant at the National Institute of Public Affairs in Washington, D.C., and garnered the distinction of being the first woman from Texas to be chosen for an internship in the national government. In 1941, while working for the National Youth Administration in Austin, she met her husband, Greer Raggio. But the war would soon separate them. With Greer serving overseas in the Pacific, Louise, now a new mother, stayed active, working as a teacher and president of the League of Women Voters. After the war, Louise and Greer moved to Dallas with their two sons. As a way to get out of the house and also secure a better job, Louise enrolled at Southern Methodist University School of Law, taking night classes while Greer took care of the boys. Louise was the only woman in the graduating law class of 1952, and following graduation was told there were few, if any, prospects for employment. No law firms in Dallas would hire women attorneys.
SMU Employment Bureau didn't even send me out because they said it would be unkind for me to go to these law firms and be turned down one after another.
For 2 years, she practiced law from her home with Greer, also an attorney. Then, in 1954, she got a call from Dallas District Court Judge Sarah Hughes.
Go down to see Henry Wade. He may have an opening. So I got myself fixed up and went down, and he hired me. He told me a year later that the only reason he hired me, he figured I would fall flat on my face, and he wouldn't have to listen to Sarah Hughes anymore. He didn't realize that a woman could do the job.
A year later, she was assigned to the county criminal court. Her appointment made headlines as the first woman prosecutor in Dallas County. But it was her dedication to see that all women be equal with men under Texas law that led her to work on what would later be known as the Marital Property Act of 1967.
Texas had particularly bad discriminatory laws concerning married women. When a woman married, she lost all the control of the property, even the property she had at the beginning of marriage. The husband and wife were one, and he was the one.
Directing a task force of attorneys, Louise would take a major part in revising the marital property laws.
Now, in my ignorance, I thought this could be done, a weekend, we could straighten all of this out. Was I ever wrong? It took 2 years with the best legal minds in Texas. We went through 7 drafts before we finally got all these laws working like a fine Swiss watch.
The revised marital property laws went into effect on January 1st, 1968. Withstanding numerous challenges, the laws also helped facilitate the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment to the Texas Constitution.
Strangely enough, these laws worked so well that 5 years later, the Equal Rights Amendment was made a part of the Constitution and had no problem. And none of this has been declared unconstitutional. So we're very proud of what we did in one session of the legislature.
The State Bar honored Louise with its highest award for her work on the Marital Property Act. Then, almost immediately after its passage, Louise began working on an even more monumental task, one that would be known as the Texas Family Code.
The president of the State Bar, after we got this going, called me and said, look, you've done this job on marital property. Why don't you take on the rest of the family code? And being a do Annie, I said yes.
Completed by 1979, the Texas Family Code was the first fully codified set of family laws in the world, streamlining marriage, family, and divorce laws that had been scattered in over 50 volumes of law books. The Texas Family Code took more than 12 years to complete. In the meantime, Louise continued to raise a family of 3 boys with Greer and practice law. Over the years, her efforts on behalf of women's rights and family law reform have given her the title the Mother of Family Law, and the Louise Raggio Endowed Lecture Series in Women's Studies was created at Southern Methodist University in 1997 in her honor.
In the past, the lecture series have been mostly male, and the students did not have the opportunity to see really achieving, articulate women leaders. And that is the purpose of the lecture series, to bring women here to meet with the students.
Although modest about all the awards and accolades she has received, her hard work and accomplishments for equality and legal reform have afforded both women and men the opportunity to make choices.
I'm certainly less impressed than other people. I've just done what needed to be done, and I didn't plan any of it. I'm frankly surprised at all the accolades and the awards and everything that I get. And I'd like to sort of pass the torch that I've been carrying for about 50 years, pass it on to each one of you, and encourage you to figure out what you can do to make this a better country. And bless you on your way. Thank you very much for this great honor. I was just lucky in being able to accomplish what we did in the Marital Property Act. But you don't have to be successful in order to have moved the problem along. I tell students that there are opportunities out there, and you don't have to be smart, you don't have to be rich, you don't have to be beautiful. You just have to see something that needs to be done and then do it.
Judges have huge backlogs of cases that they battle to keep moving forward and get resolved. They book their trial calendars out months in advance. When parties ask for a continuance, it leaves days or weeks of court time empty. The court staff will try to fill in that time with other cases, but it understandably makes the judges huffy. The only time I ever saw Louise was at my first seminar for Dallas County family lawyers and judges. Louise was the keynote speaker. I was so excited about being able to hear this doyen of family law right there in person. I don't remember most of what she said because I think it went over my head, but her topic was whining your way to a continuance. I only remember these two, but they still make me laugh. Your Honor, you know I have multiple personalities. Only one of them is licensed to practice law, and it's not out today. And, Your Honor, you know those protesters out in front of the courthouse? Well, I accidentally ran over one, and I think the police are looking for me. It wasn't what I was expecting, but it made her so vividly real to me. I lived in California during Ann Richards' tenure as governor of Texas. I think the first I knew of her was in Molly Ivins' first book. Molly wrote about a political shindig where she, Ann, Bob Bullock, who was then state controller, and Bob's director of personnel, Charlie Miles, were sitting together. A notoriously racist East Texas judge approached the group and greeted Bob and Molly. Bob introduced Mr. Miles to Charlie, and Mr. Miles held out his hand for the judge to shake. Now, Mr. Miles was black, and the judge looked disgusted as he finally took the proffered hand. Then he turned to Ann and asked, "And who are you, pretty lady?" And Ann beamed at him and said, "Why, I'm Mrs. Miles." Ann and her family attended First Church in the 1950s and 60s before they moved to Austin. I don't know if they attended the UU church there, but her career stayed faithful to UU values. As governor, she appointed more women, minorities, and LGBT folk to state office than all the governors before her combined had. She spent her life, as the saying goes, comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. I apologize for the poor quality of this 1988 video, but you all know what she looked like.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Buenas noches, mis amigos. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening because after listening to George Bush all these years, I figured you needed to know what a real Texas accent sounds like. 12 years ago, Barbara Jordan, another Texas woman, Barbara made the keynote address to this convention, and 2 women in 160 years is about par for the course. But if you give us a chance, we can perform. After all, Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did. She just did it backwards and in high heels. I want to announce to this nation that in a little more than 100 days, the Reagan, Meese, Deaver, Knopfziger, Poindexter, North, Weinberger, Watt, Gorsuch, Lavelle, Stockman, Haig, Bork, Noriega, George Bush, will be over. You know, tonight I feel a little like I did when I played basketball in the 8th grade. I thought I looked real cute in my uniform. And then I heard a boy yell from the bleachers, "Make that basket, bird legs." And my greatest fear is that same guy is somewhere out there in the audience tonight. And he's going to cut me down to size. Because where I grew up, there really wasn't much tolerance for self-importance, people who put on airs. I was born during the Depression in a little community just outside Waco, and I grew up listening to Franklin Roosevelt on the radio. Well, it was back then that I came to understand the small truths and the hardships that bind neighbors together. Those were real people with real problems, and they had real dreams about getting out of the Depression. I can remember summer nights when we'd put down what we called a Baptist pallet, and we listened to the grown-ups talk. I can still hear the sound of the dominoes clicking on the marble slab my daddy had found for a tabletop. I can still hear the laughter of the men telling jokes you weren't supposed to hear, talking about how big that old buck deer was, laughing about Mama putting Clorox in the well when the frog fell in. They talked about war and Washington and what this country needed. They talked straight talk. And it came from people who were living their lives as best they could. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to tell how the cow ate the cabbage. I got a letter last week from a young mother in Lorena, Texas, and I want to read part of it to you. She writes, "Our worries go from payday to payday, just like millions of others. And we have two fairly decent incomes, but I worry how I'm going to pay the rising car insurance and food. I pray my kids don't have a growth spurt from August to December so I don't have to buy new jeans. We buy clothes at the budget stores and we have them fray and fade and stretch in the first wash. We ponder and try to figure out how we're going to pay for college and braces and tennis shoes. We don't take vacations and we don't go out to eat. Please don't think me ungrateful. We have jobs and a nice place to live, and we're healthy. We're the people you see every day in the grocery stores. We obey the laws, we pay our taxes, we fly our flags on holidays, and we plod along trying to make it better for ourselves and our children and our parents. We aren't vocal anymore. I think maybe we're too tired. I believe that people like us are forgotten in America." Well, of course you believe you're forgotten, because you have been. This Republican administration treats us as if we were pieces of a puzzle that can't fit together. They've tried to put us into compartments and separate us from each other. Their political theory is divide and conquer. They've suggested time and time again that what is of interest to one group of Americans is not of interest to anyone else. We've been isolated. We've been lumped into that sad phraseology called special interests. They've told farmers that they were selfish, that they would drive up food prices if they asked the government to intervene on behalf of the family farm. And we watched farms go on the auction block while we bought food from foreign countries. Well, that's wrong. They told working mothers it's all their fault that families are falling apart because they had to go to work to keep their kids in jeans and tennis shoes in college, and they're wrong. They told American labor they were trying to ruin free enterprise by asking for 60 days notice of plant closings, and that's wrong. And they told the auto industry and the steel industry and the timber industry and the oil industry, companies being threatened by foreign products flooding this country, that you're protectionist if you think the government should enforce our trade laws, and that is wrong. When they belittle us for demanding clean air and clean water, for trying to save the oceans and the ozone layer, that's wrong. No wonder we feel isolated and confused. We want answers, and their answer is that something is wrong with you. Well, nothing's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with you that you can't fix in November.
Every point Anne raised in 1988 is still a problem today. That these problems are still unsolved is unbelievably wrong, and the wrongness seems to be growing. May the examples of these two women, whose lives were testaments to our UU principles, help us navigate the frightening times ahead. May we all continue to bring our sharp minds and our caring hearts to right as best we can the many wrongs we see.